Good morning, honorable members. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Before we begin our devotions today, I would like to pause for a brief moment of silence to honor the life and legacy of the veteran broadcaster and diplomat, Mr. Ed Bethel. May his soul rest in peace. Today, in our Moments of Impact devotional segment, our topic is the God of the miraculous. All of us at some point in time in our lives have found ourselves in a position where we needed a miracle from God to get us out of a difficult situation. I can personally recall several occasions in my personal life when I needed a miracle from the God of the miraculous. And can I tell you, he came through every time. The Bible is filled with stories of the mighty works of the God of the miraculous. One such story is recorded in Exodus chapter 14 about the children of Israel who found themselves in desperate need of a miracle. As they left Egypt, they became fearful and began to panic because of Pharaoh and his army that was behind them and the Red Sea that was in front of them. They were gridlocked. They had nowhere to turn. The Lord spoke to Moses, their leader, and said, "Pick up your staff and raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground." When all the Israelites had reached the other side, the Lord said to Moses, "Raise your hand over the sea again. Then the waters will rush back and cover the Egyptians and the chariots and the charioteers." So as the sun began to rise, Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the water rushed back into its usual place. The Egyptians tried to escape, but the Lord swept them into the sea. Then the waters returned and covered all the chariots and charioteers, the entire army of Pharaoh. Of all the Egyptians who had chased the Israelites into the sea, not a single one survived. But the people of Israel have walked through the middle of the sea on the dry ground, as the water stood up like a wall on both sides. That is how the Lord rescued Israel from the hand of the Egyptians that day. And the Israelites, saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up upon the seashore. What a testimony! The God of the miraculous made a way for the children of Israel to escape from their enemies. In conclusion, if you find yourself in a gridlock and don't know which way to turn, I want to admonish each of you under the sound of my voice to turn to the God of the miraculous. He is a way maker. He is a miracle worker. He is a promise keeper and light in the darkness. If he did it for the children of Israel, he will do it for you. For those of you facing some Egyptians in your personal life, I leave you with these words: "Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you shall see them no more forever. And the Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." Selah. Think and act on these things. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this brand new day that you've allowed us to see and experience. I thank you for your loving kindness that you graciously extend to us even when we don't deserve it. Thank you for being the God of the miraculous. We acknowledge today that all power lies in your hand, and there is nothing too hard for you to do. Lord, I pray for those whose backs are against the wall, those who are in a gridlock. I ask you, Heavenly Father, to release a miracle upon their lives. Your word says you are the God who performs miracles. You display your power amongst the people. Now, Father, we ask today that you would superintend the affairs of this house. May your Holy Spirit lead and guide all of what will be said and done in this place today. Father, we ask that you will endow these honorable members with strength, with wisdom, and knowledge from on high as they seek to navigate our country to greener pastures. May you, O Lord, continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Philip Davis, Jesse Cooper, Fred Mitchell, Glennis Hannah Martin, Obadiah Wilson, Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Darville, Clay Keating, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Jobeth Colby Davis, Ginger Moxley, Mario Bole, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles LaRoda, Pia Glover Rowe, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightborn, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Tinder, Marcus Rowe, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightborn, that's Leah Miller Bryce, Leroy Major, Sanranius Petty, Mikhail Bonnaby, Michael Pintard, James Kwesi Thompson, Aram Lewis, Shannon Don Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian Wood.
Good morning, honorable members. Today we have in the gallery some guests, and I'd like to welcome them as we celebrate the month of March as Kidney Month. So the Bahamas Kidney Association joins the kidney community around the world in celebrating March as Kidney Disease Awareness Month. This year has been declared Kidney Health for All, preparing for the unexpected, supporting the vulnerable. Kidney disease is one of the health problems that we struggle with here in the Bahamas. Indeed, kidney disease and renal failure is a growing global problem affecting countries around the globe. Kidney disease is an idea that needs more focused attention in the Bahamas. Our best scientific indicators are now telling us that the health of our kidneys is impacted by lifestyle choices. I wish to thank members of the Kidney Association for their commitment to the very important ideal of kidney health in the Bahamas. While your association's membership of a global community is admirable and praiseworthy, your greatest impact is local. We appreciate your efforts and commend you for all the work you do. I want to pay special homage to your president, Ms. Tamika Roberts, for her profound display of all altruism. I've noticed from your correspondence to this office that she is a living donor. That arrested my attention. I cannot think of a more powerful demonstration of commitment to an idea than Mrs. Roberts. Thank you. Today, members, I see that we are debating the procurement bill and the financial management bill. You know, anytime we talk about money, we get really rowdy in here. Today, Speaker want everybody on their best behavior. No noise, rights and eyes? No shouting today. Zip, zip. Good. No noise. Speaker feel good today. She in a good mood. Let's keep it there. Good. Feel healthy. Thank you, honorable members, for sending those warm get well. I see the opposition sending a glowing one. I was so excited lying in my bed. I was watching now, and I was very proud. Thank you, honorable member for Marco City, and thank you, members. And thank you to all my members who sent remarks. I got those. And even to those who didn't send, I forgive you all, okay? Let's get on with the people's business. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Statement and communication by ministers. Communications by the clerk.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, I beg
Thank you. Messages from the Governor General? Messages from the Senate? Where? There it is. I now lie on the table messages 12 through 21 from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke and San Salvador.
Morning, Madam Speaker,
Good morning.
and to my parliamentary colleagues. Just let me reiterate what I've been saying since we took office. That is, sound financial management principles are a cornerstone of my administration's efforts to improve the government's fiscal health. So today, we are here to repeal and replace the Public Finance Management Act 2021, the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, sections of the Financial Administration and Audit Act, and the Public Procurement Act, correcting issues surrounding the practical implementation and delivering improved governmental financial management and transparency on behalf of the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, this could have been done by way of an amendment to the actual bills, existing bills. But we thought it best just to, instead of correcting, just replace the bill. So many of the provisions in the old bill still survives. And we would have corrected those issues that we think retard and do not, in fact, have the transparency qualities that we seek and we know that Bahamian people would like. So we have already seen, Madam Speaker, how our commitment to effective policymaking and best practices has yielded stellar results during our mid-year review. Our track record speaks for itself. We have surpassed the fiscal performance of the past years, eclipsing the previous administration's pre-pandemic and pre-Dorian years. Spurred by record levels of economic growth and a recovered job market, we are now surpassing our own revenue targets. Through the work of the Revenue Enhancement Unit, we are also ensuring that everyone, especially the wealthiest people in our society, pays their fair share. We have maintained our disciplined approach to budget management, even when high priority items have exceeded allocated amounts. In these instances, we have reallocated and reorganized using existing funds from within our budget and making tough choices to ensure that our priorities are realized. Madam Speaker, as revenues grow, the government's budgetary deficit has decreased. We delivered a lower deficit while launching the most comprehensive immigration plan in our nation's history and conducting record amounts of migrant repatriations. We put millions of dollars in the hands of working Bahamians by raising the public and private sector minimum wages. We are improving facilities at PMH and renovating clinics throughout New Providence and the Family Islands. Under this administration, more Bahamians have become homeowners through our Affordable Homes initiatives and our rent-to-own program, and our rent-to-own program is well on the way. In addition, we continue to maintain robust levels of social support to help Bahamians to stay on their feet as the economy continues its upward climb. It is only through disciplined financial management that we have struck the right balance to spur growth, empower people, and improve the government's fiscal health. This balanced approach will propel us as we advance our agenda for the remainder of this fiscal year. Our efforts to combat learning loss within our schools have been initiated. We are expanding our clinic renovations in the Family Islands and investing in Family Island infrastructure, including starting the process to redevelop 14 airports throughout our family of islands. We are only a year and a half into this term, but big things are happening, Madam Speaker. Even as we successfully meet our fiscal targets, we know that there is more to be done. That is why improved financial management and public procurement are so critical. When governments are operating more efficiently and more transparently, funds are used in ways that yield a higher return on investment the public can see and feel. Eliminating wastage and inefficiencies is a high priority item that positively impacts every other item on our agenda. Our goal is to achieve unprecedented policy wins for the Bahamian people while being the best run government in our history.
Yes.
That's our goal. Madam Speaker, the Public Finance Management Act and the Public Procurement Act were two pieces of legislation, two pieces of a compendium of laws passed by the former administration. Now, while I'm sure the many technical experts who developed the framework for these acts put in a lot of hard work, there's a clear failure on the former administration's part to ensure that these two pieces of legislation were practical and consistent with sound public policy. While the stated purposes of the legislation were to demonstrate that the former administration was reform-minded in its approach to managing the country's finances, the legislation itself was unworkable from the start. After all of their talk and empty rhetoric about raising standards, the truth is that their legislation failed to meet the reality test. I know that there are those opposite who pretend that they are concerned about the amendments we are making. But the truth is, Madam Speaker, deep down, they knew how flawed their approach was. I suspect they can't care about these flaws because they knew that an early election was coming. So they brought into force these two pieces of legislation just weeks before the election. After all, their talk about fiscal discipline, they ensured that these laws were made law at the very end of their term, when it would have practically no impact on their administration. I guess their promise to help the poor wasn't the only thing they wanted to do in that next term. That never happened. It seems improving the government's financial management was also a part of that hypothetical next term. But the Bahamian people are no fools. No fools, Madam Speaker. They know that an administration that waits to pass transparency and financial management laws until the very last days of its term in office is not a group that values transparency or financial management. That is how we ended up with laws that were passed with none of the prerequisite work done for successful implementation. There was no new investment in technology and no comprehensive training program for public officers to facilitate buy-in and ensure that the public service was prepared. None of the things needed to implement this very complex compendium of legislation were put in place. Policy making, Madam Speaker, is about much more than passing laws. There is a need to think about practical elements like resources at hand, internal capacity, operational barriers, and stakeholders buy-in. There's also a need to think about the impact of the policy, including any unintended or unforeseen impacts. When you pass a law at the end of your term, you don't really give yourself any time to implement policies in a practical way. As the side opposite claims that the unworkable legislation they left on the books, now listen to this, they claim that the unworkable legislation, that's what we say, that they left on the books, they say was effective. That's what they say. Well, the real question is, how would they even know? They didn't actually implement the laws they passed in the railway. And as the member from West End and Bimini is saying, they even use it. So how do they know? How you know? Fortunately, Madam Speaker, a new administration is in place that takes its commitment to transparency and sound financial management seriously. We will not wait until 5 years to rush through amendments as an afterthought. Good governance isn't about checking boxes just to say you did something on paper. It is about the real results you get for people every day. That's right. Enactment without a real plan for implementation could have done serious reputational damage to this country, exposing the previous administration as the political equivalent of a used car salesman. They hyped their efforts up with flashy words and big promises, only to disappoint everyone as their empty rhetoric and poorly implemented policies were exposed. Madam Speaker, the passage of replacement legislation is necessary to fulfill the promise of effective public financial management, efficient public procurement processes, and more transparent and fair governance for all. There's no ulterior motive. Every change we make either strengthens loopholes within the existing legislation or covers blind spots and addresses unintended consequences. I know the other side took great pleasure in accusing this administration of not adhering to the law on a variety of matters. However, it has become abundantly clear that they have no clue how to implement the legislation they passed. Wow. The fact that they were clueless with respect to implementation is confirmed by the lack of documentation or background information related to the drafting of the legislation. Without this relevant background, it is nearly impossible for outside observers to understand the reasons for many of the clauses in the legislation and how it's supposed to work in the Bahamian context. It's as if they simply grabbed hold of a template provided to them and filled in the blanks with no thought about the practical aspects of the legislation. Madam Speaker, the public procurement bill before us today repeals and replaces the 2021 Public Procurement Act. The 2021 Act produced some of the unintended public policy consequences that we are keen to avoid. One of the worst examples of this is seen in the unequal granting of contracts. The processes put in place created an environment in which large vendors are able to dominate the competition. For example, in the procurement of food, one vendor, by virtue of its size and corporate relations, dominated the procurement of food on behalf of the government. Under the current Act, this dominance is allowed. In fact, it is an outcome that the Act, as written, intentionally brings about. However, common sense would tell you that the government, nor the Bahamian people, want to exist in a reality where only the largest, richest companies with the most resources get every contract. We can all agree that the role of government should be to broaden opportunities for a diverse range of Bahamians. Our small and medium-sized businesses deserve opportunities too. The bill before us today allows for that possibility. And as someone reminded me, that the existing bill deprives a government of the opportunity to engage in what I call affirmative action. We are moving from that, and we will allow ourselves to engage in affirmative action and still remain transparent and accountable. In fact, the new bill, as I said, Madam Speaker, does the opposite of what the current Act does by allowing for preferential treatment of specific groups. See what I'm saying? Let me repeat that. We are showing preferential treatment to specific groups. We have enshrined aspects of affirmative action in this regard. We will introduce preferences for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Yes. We are going to introduce preferences for women-owned businesses. We are going to introduce preferences for family island businesses and youth-owned businesses. These are high priority areas we are targeting as a government to diversify opportunities in the Bahamas. And I think this point bears repeating. Under the current Act, the most well-established, well-resourced businesses were able to dominate government contracts under the guise of them being the best fit for the job. This sounds good on paper, but ignores the reality on the ground. You see, Madam Speaker, there is a difference between a policy in theory and policy when implemented. What sounds good as an idea doesn't always work in a practical way. The members opposite would have realized this if they actually took the time to properly implement the laws they passed. Under the new bill, micro, small, and medium-sized businesses will have opportunities. Yes. Under this new bill, women-owned businesses will have opportunities. Under this new bill, businesses in the family islands will have opportunities. Yes. And youth-owned businesses will have opportunities. This is the Bahamas my government intends to build. A Bahamas with opportunity for all. Yes. Our procurement laws must reflect this priority. This administration took the necessary steps to develop and implement a procurement improvement plan. Among the many changes we made, we have approved a career path for procurement officers, ensuring that they are treated with the same professional respect as their colleague technical officers in the Ministry of Finance. Putting in place a new procurement framework without also ensuring that the proper upskilling and capacity building exercises were initiated was a terrible oversight. I repeat that. Putting in place a new procurement framework without also ensuring that the proper upskilling and capacity building exercises were initiated was a terrible oversight that is now being corrected. Procurement officers throughout the government service will now have the support and career progression they deserve. By putting these processes in place, we are also ensuring that we can attract new talent to public procurement and fill any shortages that may currently exist. We'll also have fully digital public procurement with the rollout of the Go Bonfire platform, a best-in-class procurement platform that is being implemented throughout the public sector and in the Public Hospitals Authority. Since the launch, it's already in place. Since the launch of the platform last November, 490 vendors have been registered. 299 opportunities have been contracted during this period, and the estimated savings from the use of the platform is $2.6 million. This number is expected to grow as more agencies move their procurement processes online. Madam Speaker, through these amendments, we are also ensuring that key areas such as treaties, international multilateral agreements, funding agreements, and other specialized areas are excluded from the normal procurement cycle in accordance with international best practices. We are ensuring that all participants in the procurement process are registered by the Public Procurement Department, where the current Act did not include international bidders in the registration process. And we are lowering the threshold for establishment of a tender committee to review bids and award contracts from $50,000 to $25,000 for more transparency on government contracts. We have revised all financial thresholds for greater flexibility, transparency, and efficiency to facilitate faster procurement agreements and completion of contracts. Madam Speaker, contracts below a certain threshold will now automatically be reserved for national bidders. Special permission will have to be granted for these procurement processes to allow for international bidding. The specific justifications must be given for approval of this request. For example, it could be for a good or service that is not available in the Bahamas. In all other cases, any contract amount below that threshold will be reserved and granted to local companies. We are preserving opportunities, Madam Speaker, for Bahamian business owners. We are also introducing greater accountability for all parties. Under the new bill, bidders who attempt to influence or induce the award of a contract by offer of employment, gratuity, or any other offer of value will be disqualified. This is yet another area that will strengthen, among others, clearly and specifically outlined in the bill before us. Let me turn to the Public Finance Management Bill, Madam Speaker. Again, I know that the side opposite has had a lot to say about this bill. The same people who, while in government, failed to pass a practical and workable law. The same members opposite who did not take a single step toward real implementation of these laws now have all the ideas in the world about implementation. I will not address their out-of-touch commentary directly, except to say, why would the people who fail to exercise effective oversight of $54 million in public funds think they have any credibility when it comes to the management of public finances? Madam Speaker, our approach to the Public Finance Management Bill was much like our approach to the Procurement Bill. We have ensured that the necessary prerequisites are in place for the successful modernization of public finances in the Bahamas. Our first priority was to look out for the finance and accounting officers who were overlooked by the previous administration. We are now processing promotions for finance and accounting officers, something that was not done since a PLP government was last in office. We are ensuring that a proper career progression framework is put in place out of respect for the valuable contributions made by our finance and accounting officers. We left in place, Madam Speaker, funding to replace the existing financial management systems when we demitted, no, we didn't demit office, we got fired. When we got fired in 2017 by the same people. But we left something in place for them. To our shock, when we returned to office in 2021, when they were fired, there was very little progress. The government's payroll system has been in use since 1998. The hardware it sits on is no longer supported by the manufacturer. Despite the funding being in place, in 4+ years, they did little to address the situation. No wonder the payment backlog increased so much while they were in office. Defunct software and outdated hardware were kept in place by the obsolete leaders. The real victims of their inaction were the thousands of public servants who showed up to work every day but were unable to receive the money they earned. This is not just a hiccup in the system. We are talking about people's careers and livelihoods here. On realizing the full extent of the issue, within our first month in office, we got to work clearing out this backlog. Some of the stacks of files were piled all the way up to the roof of the Ministry of Public Service and were left untouched for 4+ years. That could not happen under our watch. Every public servant deserves the pay they have earned. As we prioritize getting owed payments through the system, we are investing in a digital document management system and human resource management information system to ensure that this backlog never happens again. The government's enterprise resource planning system was last updated during the last PLP administration. This is yet another area where very little progress was made. There were additional upgrades necessary to assist with facilitating operational, financial, and human resources processes. Once again, it now falls on us to take up the mantle of digitalization and address these outstanding issues. To correct these deficiencies, we have signed an agreement with a leading company named Oracle to put in place a cloud-based enterprise resource planning application. This is going to modernize the financial operations of the government at a much lower cost, as the vendor is providing both the hardware and software for this application. Without these upgrades, it is very difficult to adhere to some of the requirements of the current Act. The previous administration was aware of this fact, but did nothing about it. This is yet another example of how they initiated these laws without any thought to implementation. A pre-election rush job just to say it was done in the most superficial and meaningless way. Madam Speaker, further highlights of this bill include the strengthening of the Fiscal Responsibility Council, which improved confidentiality of information and enhanced qualification requirements for members, greater flexibility for budgetary reallocations, increasing the limit from 3% to 5%, the introduction of a code of corporate governance to provide oversight of government agencies and business enterprises, the establishment of a public sector audit committee, better facilitation of the transition to accrual accounting, and reinserting the provisions related to the deposit fund account, among other significant changes. Our reforms are comprehensive, practical, and better suited to the Bahamian context. Madam Speaker, the bills before us are the product of a deep consultation with public sector, financial management, and procurement experts who have communicated great concern about the lack of practicality in the existing legislation. We must let common sense reign as far as effective policy making and legislating is concerned. Rules that cannot be practically implemented are not good rules. A policy that is introduced without preparatory work being done is doomed to fail. A law that does not account for local context cannot effectively address the legislative needs of the government. Everyone sitting in this honorable house today is aware of these basic concepts, but there are some who feign ignorance as they seek to hide their own failures and ignore the advancements being made today. Madam Speaker, the work of the government must be grounded in the facts. We must do what is effective and in alignment with the best practices as well as the local reality. The difference between the bill before us today and the existing act further highlight this fact. One was an act passed right before an election. The other is a bill developed throughout our first year and a half and delivered here today.
Yeah.
These reforms have not been delayed, and we don't have an election to hide behind. We will govern according to the highest standards reflected in these bills for the next 3.5 years. The entire Bahamas will witness the expanded transparency, improved operational efficiency, and increased accountability brought about by these bills. The proof of the effectiveness of our approach will be clearly seen in our results. We are confident that the financial management and procurement processes of the government of the Bahamas will be significantly improved. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South and Central Andros.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and thank you and welcome back. I didn't send a message, but I didn't get a response, but that's okay. I'm grateful for another opportunity to make a presentation in this honorable house and to second the bills that are laid, to repeal and replace the Public Procurement Act 2021 and the Public Finance Management Bill of 2023. Madam Speaker, as I begin my contribution, I would like to take a moment to celebrate and congratulate my youngest daughter, Lauren. Just this week, she received an Outstanding Performance Award from the Ministry of Education's Examination and Testing Division for achieving 8 A grades in the 2002 PJC examination. Madam Speaker, as I was writing this speech, I said, let me still say I want to thank the members for Angliston and Yamacraw, but I was back and forth with it because that award was coincidentally given a month before she celebrates her 16th birthday. So I was reminded by that award that it's time to open up the checkbook. My party's next month. So I don't know if they put me in trouble or whether it's a great thing. Yeah. But I do want to thank both members for their great efforts in the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Services. Madam Speaker, this week I will visit Nabi Town, not to say hello to my colleague and brother, but rather my primary schools, the track and field star athletes from the Central Andros District will be traveling tomorrow to the Carl Oliver Track and Field Stadium at Huntley Christie High School in North Andros. There, they will compete, and I dare say, win the North and Central District Primary School Track and Field meet and bring the medals back to Central Andros where they belong.
Wake up, my brother, wake up. Sorry, you still sleeping. Wake up.
In speaking about trophies, Madam Speaker, and bringing them back home, I want to wish Mr. Malik Forbes of Uthel Rogers Primary, our district spelling bee champion down in South Andros, the best as he competes this weekend in the National Spelling Bee competition.
Yes, good.
Madam Speaker, last week was observed as Women's Day, and I celebrated at the Women's Empowerment Program in South Andros. I gave congratulations to Mrs. Anya Forbes and her team for their first-year anniversary and brought remarks on behalf of my wife during their church service at Upper Zion Baptist Church, where Mrs. Melanie Green, who was just recently ordained as pastor, serves. I would also at this time, Madam Speaker, wish my two parliamentary colleagues, one from Nassau Village, Mr. Jamal Strawn, and the Member of Parliament for Centerville, Mr. Jomo Campbell, a happy birthday during this week. Madam Speaker, as the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador stated, it is vitally important that the government offers a procurement system that is well designed. In the past, the process for awarding public contracts were restrictive and creative complexity and confusion for buyers and sellers, suppliers alike. The purpose of this bill is to ensure that there is equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contracts within the government system. We also want to ensure that the system is efficient and lends to transparency and accountability that we presented in our blueprint for change. Public procurement is a crucial pillar of services delivery for governments. Madam Speaker, because of this sheer volume of spending it represents, well-governed public procurement can and must play a major role in fostering public sector efficiency and establishing citizens' trust. However, Madam Speaker, there have been evident gaps in the previous bill that the government is now obligated to rectify. The changes to the bill address the entire procurement cycle while integrating public procurement with other elements of strategic government, such as budgeting, financial management, and additional forms of services delivery. These changes, Madam Speaker, are an opportunity for all stakeholders to work together to enhance the effectiveness of the procurement system, which benefits all Bahamians. Madam Speaker, this New Day government wants to ensure that any person or businesses interested in being a part of the procurement process are and can be registered in the system fairly. And within the system, a business can upload all of the needed documentation and track its progress throughout the entire tender system. As a result, we provide greater accountability and transparency to the businesses on behalf of the government. Another change brought by this bill, Madam Speaker, is the threshold amount for reviewing bids. Under the previous act, it was set at $50,000. We now aim to place the reviews by the tender committee at $25,000. Madam Speaker, this government is very intentional about the procurement system being equitable and accessible to all. Any large amount of government spending must be leveraged to play its part in our economic recovery. Opening up public contracts to more small businesses and social enterprises to innovate in public service delivery. The government, Madam Speaker, does not aim to stifle innovation and deter small businesses and startups from ever bidding for public contracts. Therefore, new clauses in the bill gives a development preference for women-led businesses, micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, youth-led businesses, Madam Speaker, and of course, family island businesses. This is an indication that our blueprint for change is truly about change and not lip service. Recommendations by the OECD or the Organization for Economic Development emphasize the importance of encouraging procurement officials to dialogue with suppliers and enhancing data collection and monitoring of the results. Madam Speaker, it is not simply enough to approve contracts bids solely on the fact of lower cost or the ones with the most experience. A careful balance must be weighed in the decision-making process, which lends to the importance of government dialoguing with the suppliers. This openness, Madam Speaker, increases the chance that the bids our government receive for its contract will have the best price-quality ratio and make the best contribution to a more sustainable, social, and innovative Bahama land. Madam Speaker, in replacing the Public Financial Management Bill, this government seeks, as the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador just mentioned, to strengthen the loopholes and cover the blind spots. Technology has to be upgraded so that the civil servants are not waiting unnecessarily on their paychecks due to an outdated payroll software. Madam Speaker, we are in the era of digitization and cloud-based systems. Therefore, the way the government manages its financial obligations must also be efficient and cost-effective and run along with the times. For a system to be efficient, its users must also be efficient. We have heard the term garbage in, garbage out, which means that our efforts must also include enhancing the required qualifications for our team members. Madam Speaker, training, efficiency, confidentiality, and code of conduct are keywords that help to structure the changes in the bill. And as I close, Madam Speaker, we are in a time of recovery, restoration, and repair. Our efforts to improve the gaps in these bills are a testament to the Davis-Cooper administration's objective to shore up our processes. It is with the full support of the great people of Mangrove Key, Central, and South Andros that I second the bills that are laid here today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Public Procurement Act, to revise the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to further promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contractors, to further promote competition, transparency, sustainability, and integrity to public procurement and for connected matters. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too join members of Parliament to welcome you back to this honorable House. You most definitely were missed in this place. Listen, man. Y'all leave me and the Speaker. Don't get in that. Don't get in that. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I get into the substantive presentation, I do want to offer my most sincere condolences to the family of Elsada Cooper, who is a matriarch in the Maidatown community. She was laid to rest this past Saturday. And also to the family of Ann Burrows, who is in East Grand Bahama as well, and particularly to her sons and daughter. I think she will be laid to rest this Saturday. So we want to offer our prayers and condolences to those families. Also, I wish to congratulate Pastor Pedersen Ballou, who is a pastor in Proceedings. He did a very, I told him he was a very smart man on Sunday. He had a pastoral anniversary and a regular pastoral anniversary that you have every year. But he decided instead of celebrating himself, he instructed the church to celebrate his wife. And so that Sunday was completely dedicated to celebrating his wife and making sure that she was appreciated. And so I too want to congratulate him and his wife Judith. They are two very, very important folks in Sweetings Key. They live in Freeport, and they take the boat every Sunday, whether the weather is good or bad. They take the boat every Sunday to ensure that they have services on Sweetings Key for the people of Sweetings Key. So I commend them greatly, Madam Speaker. Some of us, or some persons in Grand Bahama, have never even been to Sweetings Key. And he does it every Sunday without fail. And so I commend him for it. Madam Speaker, in getting into the presentation, the Prime Minister made the remarks that, and I'm paraphrasing, that we did not implement items in the acts that we passed. The Procurement Act, obviously, was something that came into effect the month of the election. So you would not be obligated to implement any of those changes until the date of the effective date of that act coming into force. The Public Financial Management Act, the Public Financial Management Act and the Fiscal Responsibility Act, though, have fully been implemented. You have the Fiscal Strategy Report. We've had 2 or 3 fiscal strategy reports that the previous administration put into effect. We've had the budget reserve appropriation that the Free National Movement has put into effect. We've had the Fiscal Responsibility Council that the previous administration has put into effect. We've had the monthly reports, which were never done before, and which are extremely useful to not just the government, but extremely useful to the public, where the government now is obligated to provide monthly reports to the public on the financial position of a government. And that has been put into force. The election report has been put into force, and we presented the first election report. So, Madam Speaker, it is wrong to say that the Free National Movement passed acts that we did not put into effect. We are extremely disappointed, Madam Speaker, with the proposed changes to the Public Procurement Act and the Public Financial Management Act and the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Madam Speaker, to put it bluntly, many of the changes are aggressive and do not move our country forward. In fact, with respect to the amendments to the Public Financial Management Act, it completely decimates the previous standards that the Act provided for. The former administration made, Madam Speaker, every effort to consult widely on the bills. We benchmarked those bills with other jurisdictions. We got input from government officials. There were seminars with government officials. There was a complete implementation team that provided advice and consulted with ministries and public servants. We consulted with the international agencies who provided their input on those bills, And those international agencies specialize in providing expertise to governments. We also, Madam Speaker, went to professionals in our country. We provided them with an opportunity to give their input on the changes that were being made. We consulted with PICA, the accountant group. We consulted with the Bar Association. We consulted with the Chamber of Commerce. So, Madam Speaker, I am extremely disappointed that the government has decided to make significant changes, particularly to the Public Financial Management Act, without consulting PICA, without consulting the Bar Association, and without consulting the Chamber of Commerce. Also without consulting the Fiscal Responsibility Council that you've made the changes on. You've made significant changes to the Fiscal Responsibility Council without providing them an opportunity to give their input on the changes. And it is amazing that the government speaks about enhancing transparency and enhancing accountability. A significant part of transparency and accountability is providing those people with an opportunity to give their input, providing them an opportunity to speak, providing them an opportunity to be able to share their view. That's a significant part of transparency, a significant part of being accountable. Who are we accountable to? We are accountable to the people. So why make changes without providing them an opportunity to give their input? Madam Speaker, I must submit also that we must continue to raise the standard of care when it comes to management and transparency of managing the people's money. If there is a standard that the bill or the act provides, we must adjust ourselves to meet that standard and not bring that standard down to meet us. If there is digitalization, digital transformation, if there is the necessary software that needs to be upgraded in order to meet it, then let's do it, implement it. But don't bring the standard down and say that we must bring the standard down to accommodate us. Madam Speaker, we should hear from all those people who have expertise and all those persons who have an interest in...
Point of order.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Baines and Grandstand.
Just wanted to.
That should be your Minister of Finance.
Welcome. Yes, sir. Welcome back, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to provide a point of order with respect to the statement that the member for East Grand Bahama indicated, that rather than update the existing solution, we decided to change the solution. But I would like to put it on the record, Madam Speaker, that the existing solution could not be updated any longer. As a matter of fact, the software as well as the hardware has been obsolete for, I think, approximately 7 years. So there's no room for upgrading or improvements to the existing software. In addition to that, Madam Speaker, I think it's important for the House to understand and appreciate.
I accommodated it because he said it was order.
Yeah, it's a point of order because the statement that you made was incorrect.
Let us go back to the rule. What is the rule that I breached? What is the rule that I breached? And then that then can be presented. Madam Speaker, I'm in the middle of my presentation, and he is giving a presentation. He will have an opportunity to speak. So, Madam Speaker, please, I would respectfully ask that if there is a point of order, that he state what the point of order is.
I stated, Madam Speaker, the point of order that the statement made by the member for East Grand Bahama was erroneous. and that the application and the software that is currently being used has been obsolete for approximately 7 years. And I think it's important for I think it's important for your country to hear that. It is. The software is obsolete. So as a result, Madam Speaker, the ministry saw fit to replace and implement a new application software. So hence the direction which we're moving, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
You know, I am on his side. You know, I am supporting him. In fact, I think they should make him the minister for IT. I think they should make him the minister for IT. I support those things. I support them. But, Madam Speaker, that again does not change the fact that if there is a standard in legislation, then we must improve ourselves to meet the standard, whether it is to put in place a brand new software. That's fine. But we must not reduce the standard, which I believe is being done in these pieces of legislation. Madam Speaker, we on this side met with the Ministry of Finance and their team, and we want to thank the Ministry of Finance for meeting with us. They met with us yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. And, Madam Speaker, in short, unless the government can provide a far more compelling reason for the changes being made in these pieces of legislation, we on this side, fortunately, cannot support these amendments. And I will go through the reasons and go through the individual amendments as to why we cannot support them. Madam Speaker, with respect to the amendment of the Public Financial Management Act,
Yes.
the new Public Financial Management Act, Madam Speaker, removes the ability for the Accountant General, and they've now changed the name to the Treasurer, and again, I don't have an objection in terms of the changing of the name back to the Treasurer, but you have taken away powers that the previous act gave to the Treasurer or the Accountant General. One of the main powers that you've taken away from them, which you have removed from this bill, is the ability of the Accountant General to compel public servants to give evidence under oath before the Treasurer or before the Accountant General. Not very many, Madam Speaker, officials, besides judges and magistrates, in some respects, yourself, Madam Speaker, and the different committees have an ability to compel witnesses to give evidence under oath. This was a significant change in the previous bill, and it provided the Treasurer with a significant power to be able to compel public servants to come and give evidence under oath. And we know the significance of giving evidence under oath. If you lie under oath, it is an offense. It is a criminal offense to be able to do that. And so this takes away, without any significant justification, it takes away the ability of the Accountant General to do so. Madam Speaker, the second thing that this bill does is it removes the statement and removes the offense of the previous Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, which in section 5.4 says a public officer and a public office holder shall not expend public money, create debt, enter into any commitments, or otherwise create liabilities for the government without lawful authority. That was an offense in the previous act. You have now removed that, again, without any justification for removing it. Madam Speaker, we raised this point before with respect to the fiscal strategy report. You have now removed the fiscal strategy report and put it as a part of the budget. We had a discussion with the Ministry of Finance officials on this. And their point was, it is the time period in November is unworkable. Well, Madam Speaker, we don't have a difficulty with the time period, or you making the case that the time period is difficult, but do not put it in the process of the budget. Because the fiscal strategy report is a document that is supposed to guide the budget.
Exactly.
It is supposed to be a document that you look forward and you benchmark the budget to the fiscal strategy report. So why put it in the same process as the budget? The whole point of the matter is it should be before the budget so that the Ministry of Finance officials have a blueprint, a guide to be able to process the budget and make the budget by. So, Madam Speaker, we again disagree with this point. It is and what will end up happening, Madam Speaker, is it will get lost in the budget process. There are many bills that you put in the budget process because you don't want to talk about them. You just want to pass them. You don't want a separate debate about them. So you give it and you put it in the budget process. But Madam Speaker, the fiscal strategy report is so significant, it should not be a part of the budget process. And it is taking away the ability of the House to debate it. So why should we support taking away the ability of the elected members of Parliament and elected representatives, the ability to debate and discuss and recommend the way that we should be moving forward fiscally? We have it now, but now what you are doing is you are removing the ability to have a separate debate on it. So now all you are doing is putting it in the budget process and it will get lost in the budget process. Madam Speaker, you are also removing or changing, significantly changing, the exception circumstance clause of the previous Public Financial Management Act. There was a specific reason that you must justify or you must show if you wish to deviate from fiscal targets. The previous bill said temporarily depart from the requirements of the fiscal objectives in the first schedule only when sudden, unexpected events arise from external shocks resulting in a significant economic downturn, national security considerations, or a national disaster. Those are the requirements that you must meet. You have now watered down those requirements, and now all you must meet is an unforeseeable event. Well, there are any number of things that could fit under the category of an unforeseeable event. And what you have also done is those, if you were to deviate from the objectives, there was a clause in the bill, in the act, that said you had to come back to Parliament and you had to justify, and there was a debate on that to be able to justify those events. Well, you've taken that out, and what you have done is given the Ministry of Finance their own ability to say, we don't need to justify that to Parliament. We don't need to come to Parliament. We'll make our own internal adjustments. And then once we can make our own internal adjustments, then we're good. But that's not the purpose behind this act. The purpose behind this act was to bring these things to light, to bring them to Parliament, so that the people's representatives would be able to see them. You must justify them to Parliament, and then we must be able to debate them. That was the whole point of having that clause in there, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they've also taken away the fiscal impact analysis. Again, which to me makes absolutely no sense why you would remove something. This is the fiscal, let me explain the fiscal impact analysis. If a minister wishes to bring a piece of legislation, and he did not have the money in his budget to do so, he must first provide a fiscal analysis of that piece of legislation to cabinet, but he must also, while he's bringing that bill to Parliament, he must also provide that fiscal analysis to Parliament. Well, Madam Speaker, again, they've removed that. So what they are doing is taking out the powers that Parliament has. They are removing the oversight that Parliament has and putting it back into the hands of the Ministry of Finance, which is completely against the premise of what the bill was meant to do. Madam Speaker, they've taken away the entire section that speaks to offenses. This bill had a complete section that provided offenses. If you did this, it is an offense. If you did that, it is an offense. If you did this, it's an offense. They've taken everything out. They didn't just adjust it to say, well, this isn't workable, or that isn't workable, or we can change this, or we can make that work better. They took the whole thing out. So you've taken the teeth out of the legislation.
Yeah. Wow.
The only thing that provides, well, I won't say the only thing, but the best thing that provided the accountability for persons in this act was the offenses section. That if you breach this act, here's the consequences. If you do this, here's the consequences. Well, they've taken that entire thing out. Again, it is completely against the whole premise of the act. Madam Speaker, what they've done, they've decimated the independence of the Fiscal Responsibility Council. They've decimated it without even talking to the Fiscal Responsibility Council. This was a new concept for the Bahamas, where you would have independent professionals who were able to review what the government was doing. They review the fiscal strategy report and they review the budget, and they provide an independent review of that. Well, what we said in the previous act was the Speaker appointed those persons. Now, if you want to adjust where they should come from and who they should be, fine, we can look at that. But the appointment of them, you have changed it from the Speaker, and the Speaker is not a creature of instructions. The Speaker is an independent body who is responsible for an independent body, the legislature. You have removed the appointment from the Speaker, and you've now put it back in the hands of the Minister of Finance. How could you put the power to appoint the body that is supposed to judge you, the body that is supposed to evaluate you, the independent body that is supposed to evaluate you, you then take it from the Speaker and put it in the hands of the Minister of Finance? Again, you have decimated the whole basis upon which the Fiscal Responsibility Council is supposed to operate.
They don't even know.
You've taken away the money. There was an allocation, and I invite members to look at the budget. There was an allocation under the House of Assembly for the Fiscal Responsibility Council, which meant that the Speaker has the ultimate responsibility for allocating money to the persons in the Fiscal Responsibility Council. You have taken that out and again put it in the hands of the Ministry of Finance, which means that if the persons want anything, instead of making the case to the Speaker, making the case to the Secretary of the Cabinet, you now have to go to the same person that you must evaluate, which is the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, again, and then what you've done, you've taken away the general offenses for the public servants, but you've added an offense for the Fiscal Responsibility Council that says that if you breach confidentiality, you are guilty of an offense under the Act. Well, why would you take away all of the offenses that speak to fiscal responsibility and the people who are responsible for fiscal responsibility? You take that away and you now put an onerous responsibility on the Fiscal Responsibility Council in the House of Assembly. Yeah, no, but what you have done with this act is you've taken away that section that speaks to allocation going under the House of Assembly. And that now is taken away from there and now is given to the Ministry of Finance. I don't know that because you've taken it away.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exum and Ragged Island.
Member suggested in his remarks that the budget allocation was taken away from the fiscal responsibility.
No, don't get me wrong. I did not suggest that it was taken away. I did not suggest that.
Explain it.
Okay, I did not suggest that.
Explain it.
But I don't want you to put that out there. I didn't suggest it.
Explain it. Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Speaker. The member for East Grand Bahama might explain it when I'm done. But he made a suggestion, Madam Speaker, that the budget for the Fiscal Responsibility Council was taken away. And I invite him to refer to page 43 of 215 of this book, which will demonstrate that that amount of 150,000 is there and continues to be there up to 2024, 2025. That's what I heard, Madam Speaker. If he said something different, he is free and he is on his feet, so he can explain it, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member.
Madam Speaker.
You may proceed.
Again, let me make myself absolutely clear. That allocation is in the budget because we placed it in the act that the allocation is supposed to be in the House of Assembly's budget. It is only in the budget because of the existing legislation. You have removed the obligation to put it in the House of Assembly. And that is the point. So you have removed the obligation to put it in the House of Assembly. I only have 5 minutes. I'm going to move on, Madam Speaker.
Keep moving.
You have also
Stripping the House of authority.
You have also removed the budget reserve appropriation. This is a allocation in the budget that allows the government to put aside monies for items that have not been allocated for. It's a special provision. And you have about 50 million or so inside that budget. In order to use that allocation, ministers would have to go to cabinet in order to seek permission from their colleagues to use that allocation. You have now removed that obligation to go to cabinet. In the legislation, it spoke specifically that if you want to use the budget reserve allocation, you must go to cabinet to get permission to do so. You have taken that section out, which means that only the Minister of Finance, without his colleagues, will be able to make a decision to be able, or I wouldn't even say the Minister of Finance. It also could be the Financial Secretary. But we put in the act that you must go. This was so important that in order for you to use this, you must go to your cabinet colleagues and get your cabinet colleagues' permission through cabinet to do so. Madam Speaker, in my closing minutes, I want to speak briefly on the procurement bill. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister made a big point about family islands, small businesses, women, young people being able to do so. They are able to do so because there is a provision in the Act called the Development Preference Section. The Development Preference Section gives the power to use these preferences. What the bill has done is the bill has defined what a development preference is. Women, so on. Well, the section that speaks to development preference is an exact copy of the previous section that speaks to domestic preferences. It is not changed. So the power to do so was already there. The only thing they did was define it so that you're now able to use it for this particular purpose. So, Madam Speaker, they could have done it without the definition. Of course you could. You could have done it without the definition. Because the power you gave, the power to do so was already in the act. So it's nothing different from what they did. We actually put the power in the act, and all they did was copy it. They copied the same preference. The other thing, Madam Speaker, the same provision that speaks to providing the notice of contracts, they have not changed that provision. So all of this business about we can't do it because it's unworkable with the act and so on, you have not changed that obligation whatsoever. You have just repeated the same thing that was in the previous act. So if you've repeated that same obligation to provide the notice of contracts, then what prevented you from being able to provide those notices before? Madam Speaker, also, you have changed, and we disagree with this because we don't see the justification for doing so. You have reduced the amount from, and this is in terms of being where they should go, the process is where it should go. You've reduced it from 25, or from 50 to 25, but you've increased it from 250 to 450 for local committees. Again, we don't see the justification in doing that. You've also adjusted the justification for it to go to cabinet. Again, we don't see the justification for doing so. And there is a concern that I would have, Madam Speaker, with respect to direct awards, which is no bid, basically no bid contracts. So, if I could just have 2 minutes, Madam Speaker, just to wrap up. Thank you, Madam Speaker. With respect to the direct awards, you've put in place, you've actually changed the name, because you've changed the name, Madam Speaker, from limited awards to direct awards. But the wordings are still the same. The only difference that you've done is you've limited, and I understand probably the reason why you've done it, but I just question whether you haven't tied your own hands. Because you've limited the direct contracts to under $100,000 in emergency situations. And so I just wonder whether in emergency circumstances, whether that number should be higher than just the $100,000. And then, Madam Speaker, you've also taken away the tenure clause for the chief procurement officer. The chief procurement officer in the previous act gave you 5 years and then an additional 5 years. You could not serve more than 10. You've taken that clause out. So what is the justification for making that term unlimited? And we don't see the justification for doing so, because that is a clause that really should be, is a profession that you really should be training persons, and people should not be getting that comfortable in that procurement as a chief procurement officer because of the importance of it. And then you've also, just again, some minor issues that you've taken out, the accounting clause for the procurement department, which again, you've also taken out the clause that the procurement department must provide audited reports to Parliament. You've taken that out. Again, I do not understand the justification as to why, if they must come to Parliament, provide audited reports to Parliament, that you would take that obligation out. Again, Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, we must keep the standard of transparency and accountability. We must seek to raise ourselves to that standard as opposed to bringing that standard down. And it is unfortunate that these pieces of legislation bring our standard of transparency down, They bring our standard of accountability down. They bring our standard of financial management down. Whatever we argue in terms of the behavior of each of the administrations, we say one thing, you say the next. Fine, we can argue about that. But let us ensure that we keep a high standard for all of us to meet and not remove or not bring down that standard. So, Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate that if they continue along this vein and if they refuse to listen to those of us on this side and those in the community who have raised concerns. The IMF has raised concerns. The IMF itself has said that they have very serious concerns as to what is being done to the Fiscal Responsibility Council. And even that alone is a point to pause and to see what is going on. But therefore, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, we on this side cannot support the amendments as they are now.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Asmini, the chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Madam Speaker, it is indeed a privilege and an honor for me to once again to rise on behalf of the wonderful people of Carmichael to support the passage of this compendium of bills. Madam Speaker, as I do so, as always, I give the honor and the glory to my God and Savior in this holy season of Lent. Madam Speaker, let me say from the outset that I believe the most important piece of legislation here, in my view, is the Public Procurement Bill. And for that purpose, Madam Speaker, I would be concentrating on the provisions therein. And I would have paid very close attention, Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama and why he said that we ought to make compelling reasons or give compelling reasons for the need for the amendments. Madam Speaker, at the outset, I must say that I am proud that we're able to bring these amendments and ensure that they are passed, as they represent another serious series of errors that we are here to correct. And yet, this is another promise that this Davis-led administration will fulfill. Madam Speaker, as always, I continue to express in this honorable House, we will be measured by our actions and not by our words. Members may recall, Madam Speaker, that the speech from the throne delivered in October 2021 noted that this government would amend the Public Procurement Act to strengthen the provisions for vehement participation in government procurement at all levels. Today, Madam Speaker, we are here to deliver on that promise. Madam Speaker, honestly and sincerely, it was not necessarily my intention to debate today, but having gone through the Public Procurement Act, particularly passed under the former administration, which sought to bound this administration and not theirs, it was important, I believe, Madam Speaker, for me just to express a few words on behalf of the good people of Carmichael and right-thinking Bahamians everywhere. Madam Speaker, I stand on the threshold that this is a party for the poor. This is a party for the downtrodden, to ensure that Bahamians everywhere are not treated as second-class citizens in their country. And this, Madam Speaker, is why we are here today. Madam Speaker, over the course of this debate, we will hear, no doubt, claims from members opposite as they seek to rewrite history, claims about transparency and accountability. To all this, Madam Speaker, I say just simply check the records. The reason for the bills is simple. The laws passed by the Minnis administration supported by the leader of the opposition, as he was a cabinet member, cannot function. It never functioned. Indeed, as I reviewed the law they passed, I struggled to understand, Madam Speaker, what were they thinking and what was their objective in passing the act in 2021. Madam Speaker, the Minister administration passed the Public Procurement Act, the Public Debt Management Act, and the Public Financial Management Act in March of 2021. What is most interesting, Madam Speaker, and I listened very attentively to the Honourable Member for East Grand Bahama, as he indicated that they were not necessarily bound by the Act. Madam Speaker, the Public Procurement Act went through both houses, and the date of assent, Madam Speaker, is the 26th of March, 2021, the 26th of March. The appointed day notice, Madam Speaker, for the coming into effect of that act is the 1st of September, 2021. Wow. So, March, April, May, June, July, August, then September. Almost 7 months, Madam Speaker. And so, I would submit to this House, I would submit to the Beaming that they were not serious. Yeah. They were not serious about accountability nor transparency. Absolutely not. And they did it, Madam Speaker, on the eve of election. Just to say that they fulfilled a campaign promise. Actors.
Take it off. They wanted to take it off.
So, Madam Speaker, you would recall during the election campaign in 2017, they said that they would bring into existence immediately. 2017 passed, Madam Speaker, 2018 passed, 2019 passed, 2020 passed. During those years, no bid contracts, Madam Speaker, was issued by the former administration. When they wanted to purchase hundreds of thousands of dollars in all kinds of items, Persian rugs, mirrors, etc., and tens of millions of dollars, Madam Speaker, in contracts for projects, they saw no need. They saw no need for accountability nor transparency. But here we are today, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I recall when asked about the issuance of these contracts, the member for Kalani stated to this House, many individuals would have to come to the Prime Minister's office stating that when they needed some form of contract for survival. He went on to say, and I have the document, I'm going to table it, Madam Speaker. These are individuals from Baintown, Centerville, all over, Madam Speaker. As a compassionate Prime Minister, I send those people, those individuals, to beaches and parks, and I tell them they must find something for them because we cannot have individuals who cannot take care of themselves. That came, Madam Speaker, from the Honorable Member of Kalani. He said it.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Stop my time, please. That's my 10 seconds I lost just now.
Yeah, stop the time. When I get up to speak, I want the time stopped. Madam Speaker, I do not deny saying that. The circumstances were simple. There were a lot of individuals that needed help, especially during the pandemic. We had cut our budget. We recognized that a lot of those individuals would not have received help. We gave the chairman, the member for St. Barnabas, permission to rehire, issue the contracts to all these individuals. We recognize that you would run short of funding, but we will go back to Parliament that January to get the additional funds because we were not prepared to put individuals on the street who needed assistance when we as government, that is our responsibility. I did it then, and if it happened, and I'd do it again.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, what you have there, you have an admission. An admission. Madam Speaker, let me say here. I came here, Madam Speaker, to be very simple, very clear, and very straightforward. This is a country of laws. We have limited resources, and the people entrust us, all of us, collectively. There's collective responsibility here to ensure that we protect the public purse. That is why we come in this honorable house to pass legislation. That is why we're here to deal with the Public Procurement and the Financial Management Act. And if we cannot say, Madam Speaker, that we have rules and regulations, and we come here to ensure that there is accountability, and here it is, from no other person than from the leader of Kalani, from the Member of Parliament for Kalani, the former Prime Minister and the leader of the government at the time, telling the public that he will not follow no law, the competent authority. He will do whatever he needs to do. There is laws in this country. There is laws in this country. And he said he could do it again, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
I said it's the government responsibility to assist its citizens. Under those circumstances, we were not prepared to put individuals on the street without a job and not putting them in a position where they can feed themselves. And I have no shame about doing it, and I'll do it again. We will help Bahamians as long as we can.
Just open the public treasury. Open it and give everybody everything. Then how are we supposed to run the country? With rugs and carpets and mirrors? Madam Speaker, what were the checks and balances? How did they ensure that taxpayers got value for money? His response, Madam Speaker, then as it is now, is simply incredible. How was this possible when they touted this new era in procurement? How? Well, let's look at what they did as opposed to what they said. Madam Speaker, whilst the former administration passed the Public Procurement Act in 2021 and spoke good about transparency, they signed, as I indicated, the appointed day notice in September 2021, right before the election. That is why I would submit today, Madam Speaker, that side over there has no moral authority whatsoever to tell us about transparency or accountability. Madam Speaker, with all the talk of transparency and the Procurement Act, why did they fail to operate under it, even if it had not been passed? They spoke about transparency, but were their own words giving out contracts left, right, and center because people asked them for it? Did they do this with everyone? How did they select the recipients? How many were their supporters? How many persons were promised votes? Madam Speaker, during the course of this debate, there will be a lot of high talk and terms which seem complicated. Some of the debate may seem abstract to many in our communities. However, I believe it is our duty and responsibility to explain as simply and as in plain language what we are debating and its significance. How these changes will take us off the path of restricting access to contracts to the wealthiest and the most connected in this country. Madam Speaker, the Public Procurement Act is the law by which the government will purchase goods and services from the private sector. Essentially, it is the law for governing contracting. The former administration touted the 2021 Act as heralding a new day in government transparency. However, they failed to mention what I would describe as serious, fundamental, structural flaws with the law which they passed but failed to implement before September 2021. Madam Speaker, the amendments being made today maintain or strengthen the controls to protect the public purse. Those elements of the 2021 Act which are sound and practical, Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama, have been retained. Deficiencies have been corrected, and Madam Speaker, provisions which seek to unfairly and favor the most privileged in our society at the expense of those just starting out have been quashed and eliminated. Those provisions which will increase the cost to the government because of unnecessary bureaucratic requirements have been removed. And most importantly, provisions which make it harder, longer, and more difficult to do business with the government have been eliminated. Madam Speaker, this is important because for years we've been talking about the ease of doing business in this country. Yes. I would submit to you, Madam Speaker, that the act that they passed made it even more difficult. And the act that we are addressing today, the bill, Madam Speaker, it eases the business, the ease of doing business here. I'm coming to that, my brother. Madam Speaker, consistent with the commitment in the speech from the throne, this bill will introduce a number of key concepts designed to strengthen provisions to ensure fuller Bahamian participation in government procurement at all levels. In doing so, we have also sought to introduce concepts to ensure that affirmative steps are taken so that more Bahamians have an opportunity to obtain contracts. This is in direct contrast, Madam Speaker, to the act passed by the former administration, which would have led to restricted access to only the wealthiest and the most connected entities. This issue is so profound.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
It is untrue. It is untrue that the existing bill will restrict in any way Bahamian participation in this. The whole point that the procurement bill and that specific clause that spoke to preferences is to allow for more Bahamian participation. So the same power that they are using, is the same power that was already in the bill, the exact same section. They copied it. So it is incorrect to say that this existing bill. Now, if they want to say what they've done has somehow enhanced it or has somehow defined it, if that's what they want to say, I may have my view on that, but if that's what they want to say, that's their opinion. But to say that our act was restrictive for Bahamians is not true.
Thank you, honourable member.
It's about the people. People now know. Only y'all know. You know. We didn't know that when we were.
Madam Speaker.
The people know now. We made it clear in black and white.
Madam Speaker, the bill, unlike the act passed by the former administration, first of all, and in direct response to the former minister, widens the concept of development preference. This is a new term introduced in the bill. Development preference under this bill means a margin of preference, and this is in section 2 of the bill, Madam Speaker, as set forth in the bidding documents for a government contract, which may be applied to bids which are received from bidders meeting one of the following characteristics. First of all, and this is significant, and it cannot be understated and overemphasized.
Go ahead, Minister. Make it clear.
First of all, micro, small, and medium enterprises.
There you go.
So we being clear about it.
Yes.
We including them. We ain't just leaving nothing general. Secondly, women-owned businesses. We're talking about it. Madam Speaker, it has always been said that we are Nassau-centric. That's why it was important for us to put in there family island businesses. And Madam Speaker, all of us are here. We're not as young as we used to be, but we are preparing the future for the youth. And so we are saying about youth-owned businesses. That's important. Under this new bill, Madam Speaker, the procurement process will be able to set criteria to allow persons from many underrepresented groups to have a fair chance at obtaining contracts. For example, it's important. For example, if the government needs to build a dock in Ramkey, the procurement process can now provide for conditions that would give that contractor from Ramkey a real chance. A real chance of building that dock in his own community. Why should someone come from the outside? Huh? No, sir. This is not to say others are not necessarily excluded, but rather can ensure that the local contractor, Madam Speaker, has a fair chance. I submit this is progress. This is progress, Madam Speaker. Additionally, Madam Speaker, additionally, Madam Speaker, I want all of us to understand here. This is what we call heavy lifting. We in the Progressive Liberal Party are resolute, unwavering in our views that Bahamians must come first in this Bahamas. Unlike the act passed by the former administration, this bill includes specific provisions that impose restrictions on a number of procurement contracts of Bahamians. Under this bill, national bidder means in the case of an individual, national of the Bahamas, or in the case of an entity incorporated in the Bahamas and beneficially owned by a national of the Bahamas. This new act provides that under Section 27(1), where the estimated contract amount in a proposed procurement is below the threshold prescribed in the third schedule, the procurement shall be by open competitive bidding limited to national bidders. Limited to national bidders, Madam Speaker, that's what you call putting Bahamians first. Madam Speaker, whilst we have made significant changes to this bill, unlike the previous administration, the baby is not being thrown out with the bathwater. The key components to ensure real transparency and accountability remain. Indeed, these key elements have been strengthened. This bill maintains the requirement to publish a notice of the award of the procurement contract for all goods, works, and services valued over $25,000. The Public Procurement Department continues under this bill. It doesn't matter where the money is, Madam Speaker. It continues. The Chief Procurement Officer, who shall be responsible for the day-to-day management of the department and its officers and the function, is preserved. The department will continue to organize the central procurement of all goods under this. Madam Speaker, the Public Procurement Board remains and has been strengthened by the introduction of the legislative requirement that prior to appointing any person to the board, the appointer shall be satisfied that the person has the requisite skills, knowledge, and integrity, and the person has no financial or other interests likely to affect the exercise of his functions. Madam Speaker, to ensure that the bidding process is fair and open to the widest cross-section of persons available, we have restricted the fee payable for bidding documents. Now, this is very significant. As I've indicated, this is a party which is here to uplift the poor, the downtrodden. You can imagine paying for bidding documents, but listen to this, and this is what was in the act, the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama. You asked, and if you're saying that we have to give compelling reasons, I would submit to you that only for this provision, you need to support this bill. Whilst the procuring entity is still able to charge a fee for bidding documents, this new bill provides that the fee shall be no higher than the cost to the procuring entity for printing and distributing the bidding document. This, Madam Speaker, is an important protection to ensure that any government is not able to impose conditions on those who can submit bids which restrict participation to those financially able to pay exorbitant fees just to obtain the documents required to bid. I call this progress. Madam Speaker, one area we have made significant changes to is the concept of bid security under Section 48 of the Act passed by the previous administration. And I honestly could not believe that this was introduced and actually passed by that side. We had four. Remember you all say only four of them could take one car? This is what you all did. Under the 2021 Act, the former administration included provisions to require that a person provide the government with security listen to this, with security in order to submit a bid for a procurement contract as a fixed amount between 2 and 5% of the estimated value of the procurement contract. When required, the bid security had to be in a form acceptable to the procuring entity, including a bank guarantee, an equivalent instrument such as a security issued by an insurance company, or a standby letter of credit, or, listen to this, Madam Speaker, pledge property. Pledge property. You're trying to get somewhere, you're trying to help the poor man get up. They getting property from the pledge, Madam Speaker. We got to make sense of what we're doing in this house.
Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
Another requirement, alternative forms of bid security acceptable to the securing entity or from a financial institution acceptable to the securing entity, or, and listen to this, Madam Speaker, whatever is pledged has to be valid for a period of 28 days after the expiry of the bid, period, or for such other period as may be prescribed by the bidding documents. The 2021 Act, Madam Speaker, went on to provide for a procuring entity forfeiture, a bid security under certain conditions. Who, Madam Speaker, would accept this risk to bid on a contract? Well, who would have the property? Would this increase access? And I'm looking particularly, Madam Speaker, at the member for Central Grand Bahama, because he always talks, one thing, and I listen to you very carefully, he always talks about accessibility. But under this piece of legislation, Madam Speaker, I would submit that accessibility was limited or denied or simply didn't exist. Look at all the provisions I've been talking about so far. First of all, they had to go pay for the document, the bidding document. They had to provide security. All these, put them all together. What you think you got? No bid, no contract. Simple as that. You can, and Madam Speaker, I listened again to the honorable member of East Grand Bahama. He danced around. He didn't bother with the Public Procurement Act. He threw two provisions at us. Why? Because it is indefensible. The 2021 Act, Madam Speaker, when one considers their bid security provisions and reviews the type of bid required, it is easy to see how the government could use the security process to disqualify qualified persons from submitting bids. It is as simple as that. Mindful that this is not the contract stage, but to submit a bid for consideration only. No bank guarantee or equivalent instrument, such as the security from an insurance company. No standby letter means that what? Your bid was rejected. No property to pledge means that your bid was rejected. No bid, no contract, Madam Speaker. It was as simple as that. There was much fanfare, Madam Speaker, when the former administration passed this act. However, this little hidden clause was not highlighted. Disqualified many Bahamians from the gate. Wide sweeping powers to disqualify bidders. And again, we must ask why. Why were they so fixated on having the power to disqualify as many bidders as possible? Is it that if you control who can bid, you inevitably control who gets the contracts? But today, Madam Speaker, is the new day. Yes. Under this Davis-led administration, everyone will have a fair chance to obtain contracts in an open, transparent process. Another provision, Madam Speaker, of the F&M Passed Act that I wish to highlight is Section 77, titled Surcharge by the Financial Secretary. Madam Speaker, I highlight this as I am not certain to what degree persons within the service are aware of this provision. It provides, subject to subsection 2, where it appears to the Financial Secretary, upon a report by the Auditor General, the Director of Internal Audit, the Treasurer, the head or deputy head of the procuring entity, or any senior officer employed in the procuring entity, that any person who is an employee or who was an employee of the procuring entity, or any person who acted as an agent of a procuring entity, has been responsible for the procuring entity engaging in a method of procurement in contravention of this act that resulted in a deficiency or loss of public monies which would not have been likely to occur had the procuring entity engaged in the appropriate method of procurement. B, made an unauthorized procurement of goods, works, or services contrary to the provisions of this act. And C, provides no satisfactory explanation to the financial secretary to the method of selection. The financial secretary may surcharge against that person the amount of the deficiency or loss of public monies or amount of the unauthorized procurement or such lesser amounts as the financial secretary may determine. Madam Speaker, judge, jury, and executioner. Let's consider this law as against the response of the former Prime Minister relative to the Parks Authority as he just spoke about. A decision is made by the Prime Minister. As he said, he sent everybody down there to get contracts. So if the Prime Minister sends you, what do? Carry out the Prime Minister's order. As he just said in this House, Madam Speaker. A decision is made then, the public servant carries out the request. The request is not consistent with the act. What is the civil servant to do? What protections do we afford that civil servant placed in such a difficult position? How does that conflict with their employment contract terms? They, by their own statements, had no regard for the process, no regard for the Public Beaches and Parks Authority Act. Yet they sought to ensure that when the time for accountability would come, it would be the civil servant who only wanted to keep his job who would have to pay all the money back. That was in the act. That was in the act. Madam Speaker, I tried to figure how in the world could an Attorney General draft such provisions and put them in there. That was a personal liability on a civil servant, Madam Speaker. Can you imagine that, Madam Speaker? Our civil servants.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Madam Speaker, I again did not want to misleading. I did not want it to be left out there that the public servant is in this, with using this provision, is going to be left somehow disadvantaged, because in the previous, I believe it's the Fiscal Responsibility Act or the Public Financial Management Act, where a public servant is being asked to do something that he feels is wrong, there is provision in the act that allows you to put that in writing. And you can put that in writing either to your minister or put that in writing either to the Prime Minister. And if you put that in writing, it then prevents you from being held liable. So I just wanted to make sure that both sides are being put out there, that under the Public Financial Management Act, that once you put in writing an objection, then you are not going to be held responsible.
Thank you,
That is,
member.
Madam Speaker, I do not, as an attorney, I'm not a KC. I have a KC sitting on the side of me, and he said that is not in the act, and I tend to agree with him. Two KCs, as a matter of fact. Madam Speaker, as a matter of fact, so I have a contract which I am advised, well, it was issued by the Public and Beaches Parks Authority, and it's one of these contracts which the Honourable Member for Kalani indicated was issued. So I would submit to you, Madam Speaker, that there's nothing, nowhere whatsoever, there's many contracts, right, that what the member of East Grand Bahama is saying does not expose the public servant to liability. The liability. And there's no timeline neither. I got it up so the camera could see, the people could see. I wish you could see the name. I could table it too, Madam Speaker. So you could see, so people could come and see it as part of the hand side. Madam, members opposite may seek to throw allegations with little proof, and we can debate their furniture purchases. We can debate their feeding programs. We can debate their sidewalks to nowhere. We can debate their no contract signed by persons known and unknown. We can debate the contracts at the Parks Authority, which were dished out like candy with regard to any document, legal and administrative. Yes, Madam Speaker, this Progressive Liberal Party government is serious about governance and ensuring that this bill represents real progress and protection of the Bahamian people. We are serious, Madam Speaker, about transparency, and this bill provides at Section 54 that bidders who do not play by the rules by corrupting the bidding process will have their bids disqualified. Madam Speaker, this bill also includes robust principles of procurement which require, may I have one more minute? Thank you, Madam Speaker. Procurement which require that effective mechanisms must be in place in order to enable officers and tender committees responsible for procurement into procuring entity to discharge their personal responsibility on issues of procurement, risk, and expenditure. Madam Speaker, I will not necessarily go into any other provisions of the bill, as I'm sure my colleagues will do the same. But all I will say, Madam Speaker, is that I am very proud to be part of this Davis-led administration. I am proud to serve in the cabinet of very fine, high intellects who put Bahamians first. As I said, Madam Speaker, I will end as I began. Let us then be measured by our actions and not by our words. Yes. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Good day, Madam Speaker, and welcome back, Madam Speaker, to this chamber. And like was stated earlier, we did miss your presence here. Now, Madam Speaker, during the last sitting, you laid some rules down with respect to housekeeping. But Madam Speaker, I would like to appeal on behalf of all of those of us who have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get on the flight to come to Nassau, to Parliament, to allow us to have at least one cup of coffee to wake up. And I'll make it a point. I don't want to miss what's going on in here, so I'll make it a point to walk around afterwards and ensure that all of those cups are collected, along with a good member from Pine Ridge, who was with me this morning in the smokers room pining for some coffee. So please, on our behalf, we will promise to keep it clean if you allow us at least one cup of coffee to keep us awake.
You can have as many cup of coffee as you want.
Keep it
but
clean.
I just don't bring it in the house.
I would like to say happy belated birthday to my wife Heather, who celebrated yesterday. Yes, thank you very much. And to my daughter Jasmine, who I know is watching right now in Freeport. A special greeting, as always, goes out to the great constituents of Central Grand Bahama, whose voices I happily echo in this honored house. Madam Speaker, I would like to offer sincere condolences, as was stated earlier, to the family of MCM Joan Russell Newton, who passed away this weekend, as well as to the family of Ann Burrows, and also to the family of Alceda Cooper, who is buried in laid to rest in Maida Town, a funeral that I attended along with the family. I'm always proud, Madam Speaker, to talk about the great things we are doing in Central Grand Bahama, and I will not stop talking about our world-famous farmers market. We held the latest on this past Saturday, and I cannot but help say thank you to all of the supporters, volunteers, and those who came out as vendors to sell their goods. Madam Speaker, I would like to take a brief opportunity to say thank you to the good member from Southern Shores, who took it upon himself to, along with it, and executive chairman of BAIC, to make a special visit to the farmers market on the weekend in Grand Bahama. So to Mr. Leroy Major and his team, they came out to the farmers market. He promised me in here that he would visit. And true to his word, he came over and he went to every vendor stall after addressing the crowd and spoke to each of the vendors about opportunities that exist at BAIC, and he made a commitment to help them. He made a commitment to help them to bring their produce to market and to grow their business. And we will certainly be holding him to those promises. So once again, I would like to say a special thank you to the member from Southern Shores and the executive chairman of BAIC. We have to give credit to where credit is due. It was a great, my leader's busy, he's at a funeral, but we had our support. It was a great day and a spectacular event. And Madam Speaker, we look forward to the next edition on March 18. I once again invite all parliamentarians, colleagues, and those across the length and breadth of the Bahamas to come out and feast on our freshly grown produce. This initiative has certainly taken root and is going from height to heights. And I also want to say thank you to the chairman of the West End Township, Mr. Jimmy Smith, and his crew, who also attended, and they asked us to bring the farmers market down to the West Grand Bahama. So again, we're opening doors now to put food on the table of our struggling people. And the Speaker, the time to act on food security is now. Food prices are getting higher and higher. And the only way for us to combat it is to grow our own. The work of food security, or the work to food security for the entire Bahamas, indeed continues. That is the way of our future. It is our way of survival. Madam Speaker, I want to briefly touch on repairs to the fishing hole causeway, which is a part of Central Grand Bahama. The lower service road, the base was prepared, and I do believe, but from pictures that I've seen, they're now paving the roadway. But Madam Speaker, I believe that we would have missed a wonderful opportunity. Because years ago, the culverts under that road, before the bridge was built, collapsed. And therefore, the tidal flow from north to south, or south to north, depending on where the tide was ebbing or flowing, or the direction of the wind, was stifled. So the road, in essence, became a dam. And as the tide would rise from the north or the south, we had flooding. There's absolutely no relief for the water to flow through and for it to stabilize. It causes flooding in the area. And on several occasions, I made the point to the road builders, based on reports from the engineers, that the culverts had collapsed. And we are asking on behalf of the people to put the culverts in. But we're getting the argument that there are two issues. One, if you put the culverts under the road, a lot of silt will flow into the harbor. Well, that's an argument that I'm not buying into, because there's something in marine construction called silt screen that will stop the silt from flowing through. And furthermore, if there's no dredging on the northern side by Bahamians, I don't know where the silt is going to come from. That's argument number one. And the second thing is they're saying, well, if we open up the waterway, it's going to increase the current flow, and more flow will be going into the harbor, and we'll have issues with our turning basin and navigating our big cruise ships. Again, to me, that doesn't hold water. No pun intended. Because if you're operating a huge cruise ship and there's an additional 5 knots coming through, if you cannot navigate those watercrafts, then you shouldn't even have your license. So again, in order to charge the marine life, the ecosystem, to recharge areas like Billy Key that we had, we need to have that current flowing through. I see.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
I think the member for Central Grand Bahama is putting on record his personal opinion. I make reference to him to studies, and tidal wave studies that have been done by the Hutchison-Lepore group of companies. And I strongly suggest that you look at those research consultancies before putting your own personal opinion on the table. Now, you have a right for your personal opinion, but I just want to set the record straight that there's been multiple consultancies that resulted in what we have today. And those consultancies are on record. I suggest that you look at them and get engineering professional opinion before making statements of that nature.
This is not the point of figuring out anyone.
Thank you,
Madam Speaker, but I stand by my opinion, and the culverts were initially put under the service road before the bridge to allow nature to flow through. There was a current that flowed from north to south. The fishing hole road is now a dam. It is causing it. I did study the reports. But again, the argument was that the silt will flow through into the harbor, and there'll also be a disturbance in the turning basin. I do not buy it personally, and I believe that further studies need to be taken as to why those culverts were put in the first place. They were needed. They were needed then, and I submit that they are needed now. And that is my opinion. I just believe that, again, with that dam taking place, we have flooding, and a lot of the ecosystem, the mango, the red mangoes, they dried up because of the lack of current flowing through to charge the creek. Again, it is my opinion, and I yes, it goes on record as my opinion. I now turn my, I'm fine. I love information, but again, based on what I see, growing up on the water and knowing that area, I do believe that we have a problem, and that's one of the reasons why tide is flowing, and we're having more flooding in there. Pardon?
Did you not provide advice?
Did I provide advice?
Yes.
Yes, put the culverts in and let the current come through.
And what happened?
That was no one heeded. No, it's not about the government. It's before. It was before. When
which happens.
you're on the floor, you will get on the floor and speak, or you will speak anyway. Madam Speaker, I now turn my attention to the Public Procurement Bill 2020-22 and the Public Finance Management Bill 2023. These bills, if you get on the floor, don't sit, no talk me from your chair. That ain't speak, that ain't hold water here. These bills, in their current form, seek to repeal and replace several key financial bills introduced during the last F&M administration. These landmark and historic pieces of legislation were put in place to ensure that the government's finances are properly managed and that there's accountability assured for the Bahamian people. The previous F&M administration introduced a suite of financial bills throughout our tenure, including but not limited to: 1, the Public Finance Management Act 2021, 2, the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, 3, the Public Procurement Act 2021, 4, the Public Debt Management Bill 2021, and 5, the Statistic Bill 2021. We provided a foundation and the roadmap for this New Day government to follow, and we understand that governments are continuous. So, in our view, it should be followed. The F&M administration took the country from a decade of no growth, facts, to a consecutive period of economic growth prior to Hurricane Dorian and the pandemic. We didn't ensure that the work that we left in place not only improved the country's fiscal governance, but it also brought our fiscal governance in line with international best practices. That was our objective and our focus. And most importantly, we began fostering much-needed transparency and, yes, accountability on behalf of the Bahamian people. This is what the F&M government is all about. We believe that the Bahamian people had a right to know where the money was going and how it was spent. The last F&M administration brought modern legislative reforms with these bills and a monumental shift in public financial management. That's a fact. So we cannot understand why this New Day government cannot seem to just follow it. Madam Speaker, we are happy to see this New Day government continue to uphold the standards that we left in place. But in all things, our biggest hope is that the Bahamian people is put first. In all things, our biggest hope, Madam Speaker, is that they will listen to the cries and the woes of the small man. We do not believe that this bill in its current form does that. It is indeed regressive. The framework left in place was updated and progressive and does not require the facelift. Does not require the facelift, as was stated by East Grand Bahama. It's basically a facelift that this administration is seeking to give. Matter of fact, they are trying to change the legislation you have not even been able to follow since coming into office. It cannot be minimized that there was a disregard of this New Day government to present their fiscal strategy report in line with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The New Day government has already displayed blatant contempt for the rule of law and the Bahamian people through their actions. They have said that the act has fundamental flaws because it didn't suit their timelines. Once again, we call it lip service and urge this government to follow the rule of law. Madam Speaker, there are some advantages as well as disadvantages with both bills. We understand the need to have a public finance and fiscal responsibility framework to guide the growth and development of our country. But the bills in their previous forms were not done through aggressive consultation, but they were done, as was stated earlier by the member for East Grand Bahama, through aggressive consultation by the best legal minds in the country and by international consultants. Madam Speaker, public procurement should be about opportunities, it should be about transparency, it should be about accountability, and it should be about efficiency. The ease of doing business is always an issue for both Bahamian entrepreneurs and foreign direct investors. Systems and tools needed to be implemented that will eliminate layers and bureaucracy instead of adding layers that will only continue to frustrate the process and make the ease of doing business even that more difficult. We should be seeking ways to streamline our efforts while ensuring accountability at all levels. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, as always, the official opposition is here to provide bipartisan support for this New Day government. But we must always keep the interests of the public first. If you are doing that, take VAT off of breadbasket items. Take VAT off of feminine products. Take VAT off insurance. Instead of supporting the local mom and pop, this new New Day government of tax and spending is seeking to backdoor. You're now seeking. Madam Speaker, take control of the House, Madam Speaker. Take charge of the House, Madam Speaker. You want to be Toby, eh? I would start over. If you want to help the small man and put the public interest first, take VAT off of breadbasket items. Take VAT off of feminine products. Take VAT off insurance. Instead of supporting the local mom and pops, this New Day government of tax and spend is seeking to backdoor the local entrepreneurs in the short-term rental market. They are tax and spend. That's it. Plenty tax and plenty spending. These entrepreneurs are filling a void. These entrepreneurs, Madam Speaker, they are filling a void that exists, particularly in islands like Grand Bahama. They are filling a void. And the member for East Grand Bahama is consistently speaking to this. And I remember raising it also in this parliament. Registration of short-term rental. That's a backdoor approach to end up taxing our people. They are filling a void that doesn't exist, particularly on the island of Grand Bahama, where we have hotels closed. We don't have the hotel rooms. These entrepreneurs are adding pieces onto their house or subdividing their homes to generate revenue, to give the visitor experiences that they won't get in the hotels, to provide extra rooms. The Airbnb, and we're now wanting to register them. You want to tax them when they already pay taxes and service charges to Airbnb. I think we should be seeking ways to encourage these individuals, to empower them.
Yes, sir, yes.
Make some grants available.
Yes.
Fix up your home, add on a room or two. Fix up your yard. Create more rooms. Do not look at ways of taxing and spending. You tax and spend, and when you tax and spend, you are putting an extra load on the common man. Go after the rich, super rich. Go after the super rich. And once again, I will always say, and I'm not going to rest on this, if you are seeking creative ways to generate revenue, instead of going after the small man, go after the super rich. Add real property tax of $2 million and above. We taking tax off of properties and off of the super rich when they didn't even ask for it. And we're taxing. Sorry, one behind me. And then we're putting tax, adding tax on the shoulders of the small man. Let us be more creative. We have properties on the island, like Grand Bahama. We have properties on the island of Grand Bahama, and I'm going to continue to say this, where we as a government need to do something about it. We have the investors that came to this country. They signed heads of agreement where they're supposed to create jobs, bring in tourists, generate revenue. That's according to their agreement. They got the prime pieces of land, whether it's crown grant or by $1 purchase. And they pack up, driftwood, hardcore, whatever you want to call it. And they pack up and they leave the country with those prime properties sitting in the middle of the city. They ain't cleaning it up. They're not cleaning it up. They're not reinvesting in the Bahamas. But I'm saying as a nation, as a government, driftwood is first. I am agitating on behalf of the people. Thank you. I am agitating on behalf of the people. If we give them a timeline, issue a timeline to these investors. If within a certain period of time, if you do not redevelop your property, if you do not abide by the heads of agreement, that property is reverted back to the state and people for them to sell. And they can generate revenue. But to me, it's a crime. We cannot allow them to continue to hold on to these properties and disadvantaging our people. Say, can I get an amen then? But again, no, on a serious note, we really need to look into that. We have crime breeding areas, we have health hazards on those properties. So we need to look at restoring those properties on behalf of the people. And if we cannot get those done, then give the properties back to the people, because those same investors are in other countries, generating revenues, investing, and making money. And they have prime properties in the city of Freeport and other islands of our Bahamas land. As a government, let's do something about that on behalf of our people. Again, to the residents of Central Grand Bahama, I am honored to stand in this honored house to represent you. Unfortunately, as stated by the member for East Grand Bahama, the amendments to these bills in its present form will not be supported by Central Grand Bahama. And having said that, Central Grand Bahama hereby rests. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member Asmini. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Central and South Abaco.
Oh, boy. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm, again, humbly honored to rise to speak on behalf of my people, my fellow Abaconians in Central and South Abaco, on this Public Procurement Bill 2022, Public Finance Bill 2023. But of course, you know, I got to speak to my Abaconians first. I'd like to personally thank the Prime Minister and the good member from Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador for coming down to Abaco on Friday and Saturday to see firsthand our challenges. Mm-hmm. It shows by action his dedication to the family islands and Abaco. Madam Speaker, the people were encouraged to see him there. I was encouraged to see him there. And we know that Abaconians and family islanders are being seen and highlighted. I'd like to thank my staff and team, been with me straight through, and we're moving forward. We're getting things done. But more importantly, you know, my wife and my two young children, my daughter and my son, they, you know, it's a lot of strain on the family in doing the work for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and my fellow Bahamians. But when I started on a mission to do something for my community, for the constituency, and for the greater country, it was my wife who said, stop complaining and go do something about it. Madam Speaker, that's what this Davis Cooper administration is doing something about it. We are moving forward in a real way. The Bahamas for Bahamians. It is a uphill battle. When we came into office, it was like grabbing a cart going downhill out of control. First, you got to get it under control before you can steer it. But, Madam Speaker, I want to say revenues are on the rise. Tourism is on the rise. Nassau doesn't have enough hotel rooms. That's a good problem, man. We can keep bringing them. So I want the entrepreneurs and the Bahamians across this country to step forward and start your dream. Build your little hotel and start growing. We need more rooms. We need more attractions. We need more things for our friends from abroad to come here and enjoy and spend a little money. Recently, Madam Speaker, I had the opportunity and the privilege to speak with Nettie Simonet. And she is a Bahamian entrepreneur that started great things in South Abaco and then moved to Nassau and did some good things here. And it shows that Bahamians are the best entrepreneurs. Given the chance, we can take this country to the next level. I encourage, again, step forward, fellow Bahamians, and build out this tourism product and have it Bahamian owned, Bahamian run, and operated. So it's important to say tourism's on the rise. Airports are full. Rooms are full. We need more. And that's what we're doing, because we have a plan to stretch tourism across this nation, down south, all the way up north, from east to west. The good gentleman from Central Grand Bahama was talking about Airbnbs, VRBOs, and all these other things. Well, it's just a registration. There's an exemption for those small guys. But what he's missing out is the hundreds and thousands and thousands of Airbnbs, VRBOs, short-term vacation rentals spread throughout the family islands, Abaco, Eleuthera, Exuma, and so on and so forth, that are foreign-owned and not paying tax or VAT or anything to conduct business or making profits in our country without contributing to our country. So as he's speaking about Airbnbs and VRBOs, I want him to recognize there is an exemptions for that entrepreneur, that Bahamian trying to venture out. But we cannot step back and step aside while foreigners come make real money and not pay their share. So my good friend from Central Grand Bahama, I'd like you to take note that different parts of this country have different economies, and we must have a balance of government revenues from these areas. But we're here today, Madam Speaker, we're here today to speak on these bills. We're here today to speak on these bills. So it's important that it's noted that this Procurement Act, this public procurement bill, is another factor in elevating and giving economic empowerment to Bahamians. As it was noted, youth businesses, businesses owned by women, family island businesses will be able to take part more competitively in these procurement areas. And then when it says competitive supply, but there's also value of money. Value of money is real. You know, I'm new to the national level, and when I see some of these contracts that had gone out previously, and the enormous amount of money spent, sometimes without a rhyme or reason. We speak about value of money. Well, this bill has sections that speak to that. Section 29, electronic reverse auctioning. This is something that will give a competitive auction to the bidders at hand for these procurements to bring down the price so we get the best quality and the best price, and we're not just going with the first one out the gate. It's important. It's the people's money. We need to do more with the people's money. We can't just go out and spend top dollar for items that we can get a competitive and value for money bid. 21E, reasonably determining use market-based pricing. Again, not overpaying, getting more for our money, more for the people's money. This Procurement Act speaks on that. There's sections on that, and it's something that I like to see. You know, for far too long, in the past I've seen, you know, paying top dollar, but now we have a competitive advantage. Electronic reverse auctioning will bring them to the table so they can bid to bring us the lowest price for the best quality goods for our government agencies and departments. Madam Speaker, increased competition. It's key. Increased competition is a big thing. This bill promotes by leveling the playing field. Family island companies will be able to be more competitive because we'll be able to put in that their cost of doing business may be a bit more. So instead of saying everything's Nassau-centric or Central Bahamas-centric, you know, let's let family island businesses take care of family island. Let's grow the other parts of our country. And that's how you grow a country in a whole. There's opportunities across this nation. And we want to make sure that every island and people across this nation are being felt and are having that economic empowerment that is at the forefront of this administration. This bill will benefit more Bahamians. I want to speak on micro businesses. That's your mom and pop businesses. Well, let me tell you how to grow an economy and grow a nation. Those mom and pop businesses, those micro businesses will turn into small businesses. And then they'll have a few employees. The right opportunity, the right drive, and a little hard work, those small businesses will turn into medium-sized enterprises, and that is growing an economy, and that is empowering the Bahamian people to go from mom and pop up to medium-sized and employing more Bahamians and growing our country within. That's important, Madam Speaker, very important. And I would be remiss not to repeat myself and say, women-owned, youth-owned businesses will be highlighted, and they will be given opportunities to grow in this country. Must have a level playing field. As I speak to my daughter, I tell her, she's 10 years old, and I tell her there is nothing that you cannot do in this country or this world. There is no opportunity that a man can do that you cannot do. So dream big, take advantage, and grow this country on the backs of all. Transparency. You know, this word's thrown back and forth a lot. You know, I lived, you know, firsthand and seeing firsthand the lack of transparency. But within this bill, it gives the opportunity for all parties to register electronically, which will give greater access to those parties that are interested in bidding. But not only that, there's a piece of a KYC in there, know your client. So it's we want to know who the beneficial owners of these bidders are, so we don't have one group of people, the upper echelon, that 1%, taking all the contracts from all the people and not spreading the wealth around. We need to make sure that all Bahamians nationwide are given the chance to bid and grow their companies, their manufacturers, their importers, their wholesalers, whatever you may do, but make sure they're given the chance to grow. Far too long has one little group by the name of different companies been able to gather up all the bids one time. No. We're going to spread it to every Bahamian across this nation, geographically, gender-wise, and age. We want our youth growing up to know that there is a purpose and there is a path to prosperity in their own country. Speaking of crime, I think a lot of our problems are that we don't show the youth that path. We don't encourage them and tell them that there is a way forward, so they feel left out. A lot of them feel abandoned and then they go down the wrong path. We must empower our youth and Bahamians of all. You know, when they speak about managing the people's money, you know, I must bring something to attention that has been it's a vexing issue in Abaco right now. The previous administration, under the DRA, tried to put in a hurricane shelter in Central Pines, my good colleague's constituency. Well, they spent almost $1 million. Foundation not even complete. So this government was thinking, yes, we could use that foundation, let's move forward and let's get this done, hurricane season approaching. But when the contractors went there, almost $1 million on a foundation not complete, foundation is unable to use. It was built improperly, the ground is not good, and if they were to consult people on the ground and Abaconians, they could have pushed it back a little bit on solid rock and you don't have this problem. $1 million down the drain. This is one example. It's one example. So when I hear transparency and using the people's money, I know firsthand. I've seen the lack thereof, the lack of consultation. When they talk about consultation, you know, I just think of things in Abaco, and because that's what I know firsthand. The debris site across from Spring City. But $1 million spent on a foundation we cannot use. It's one example, one small example, but $1 million that our people's money that could be put to good use. This finance bill, you know, to me, the consolidation and the repeal of the Public Finance Management Act of 21, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018, the Fiscal Administration and Audit Act of 2010, sections 36 to 44, it reminds me of efficiency. You got all these different things when you could bring it into one concise bill that speaks to the same thing and speaks better to it, improved it, updated it. Efficiency. Efficiency equals savings. Saving the people's money for doing more things across this nation. You know, there's a lot in this bill, and I know there's some really good, more financially in tune people than I am that are going to be speaking after this. But there's piece into the governments of local government and yearly and mid-year budget planning, and another thing of a pre-election update, which I think is great. You know, we got to know where we stand. The people need to know where we stand. We're going into an election. We can't come here and then find out, wow, we're at $1 billion of outstanding bills and all kinds of other things. You know, we got to be more responsible. We got to start treating the people's money as our own and be responsible in not only getting value for procurements, but spending it properly and responsibly. Transparency. But reaching out to my Family Island people, reaching out to my fellow Abaconians, as you'll see in this Public Finance Management Bill of 2023, Section 52 about the Consolidated Fund, Section 4. I just want to read this. It's very important. Revenues derived from real property tax collected under Real Property Tax Act in respect of property located in family islands. All taxes and fees collected on a family island under the Road Traffic Act shall be utilized to defray expenses and fund expenditures for the family islands. In simplest terms, property tax collected and road and traffic tax collected will be used in the family islands where it's collected. And then it goes on to say no less than 10% in 22, no less than 17% in 23, and not less than 25% in 24. So it's a staged approach. But see, Madam Speaker, this is revolutionary. This is moving forward. This is giving the family islands the tools needed to grow this country. Yes. These bills are giving the Bahamian people the tools needed to grow. Grow is what we're doing, and we want the economic empowerment to be spread across this nation to all people. So, Madam Speaker, Central and South Abaco support the Public Procurement Bill 2022 and Public Finance Bill 2023. God bless my fellow Bahamians and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
We'll secure the next spot, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, I now move to the House. I'll take its luncheon break and return at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended until 3 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is agreed. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m.